The village was quiet under the cold winter sky. Snowflakes fell slowly, but instead of beauty, they only reminded people of hunger and suffering. Ji-hoon stood in a long ration line, his body shivering in the icy wind. His stomach growled, but he stayed silent. Everyone stayed silent. From a broken loudspeaker on the pole, a patriotic song about the supreme leader blasted into the air. The people in line kept their heads low. Nobody dared show anger. In North Korea, even your face could betray you, and one wrong look could bring punishment. A soldier walked past, his heavy boots crunching against the snow. His eyes scanned each person like a wolf searching for prey. Ji-hoon's heart pounded. He had seen before what happened when someone showed weakness. A soldier's fist, a rifle butt, or worse prison. Ahead in the line, a thin woman begged for an extra ration for her child. "Please, he is starving," she whispered. The soldier guarding the counter slapped her so hard she fell into the snow. Her boy cried, but no one dared to move. Ji-hoon forced himself to look away. Helping others here was dangerous. Finally, Ji-hoon reached the counter. The officer threw a small piece of cornmeal into his hands, no bigger than his fist. That was all. It could not feed even one person properly, but it was all they had. Ji-hoon held it tightly, as if holding gold. At home, his wife's son he sat near the broken stove, trying to keep the fire alive. Their little daughter, Hannah, was wrapped in blankets, her eyes large from hunger. Ji-hoon placed the cornmeal on the table. Sun-hee gave him a weak smile, but he could see her disappointment. "This will last us one meal," she said softly. Ji-hoon knelt beside Hannah. She looked up at him with tired eyes. "Appa, will we eat today?" "Yes," Ji-hoon whispered, stroking her hair. He smiled for her, though the smile was a lie. Suddenly, a loud knock hit the door. 3 hard bangs. "Soldiers!" Ji-hoon's blood froze. Sun-hee grabbed Hannah protectively. He opened the door slowly, bowing his head. 2 soldiers entered without permission. One searched the small room. The other stared at the cornmeal. "Where did you get this?" the taller soldier demanded. "From the ration line," Comrade Ji-hoon answered carefully, his voice shaking. The soldier picked it up, studying him with cold eyes. For a moment Ji-hoon thought they would take it. Then, with a smirk, the soldier tossed it back. "You're lucky," he said. "If we catch you stealing food, you'll go to the camp." The soldiers left, but fear stayed behind. Sun-hee let out a shaky breath. Ji-hoon sat down, his hands trembling. That night, they made thin porridge from the cornmeal. Hannah ate slowly, smiling faintly. Ji-hoon stared into the fire. In his heart, something was changing. He imagined another life where Hannah ate without fear, where Sun-hee didn't have to hide her tears. Dreams were dangerous in North Korea. Dreams could kill you. But as Ji-hoon watched his daughter lick the spoon clean, he felt a seed of defiance grow inside him. For the first time in years, he thought, maybe we can escape. The days grew colder, and with them, the silence of Ji-hoon's heart. Hunger was no longer a passing ache. It had become a constant shadow, following him wherever he went. At the factory, men worked like broken machines, their faces pale and hollow, their hands trembling from weakness. When someone collapsed, the guards didn't help. They shouted, kicked, or dragged the fainting body away. Everyone else had to keep working, eyes down, lips shut. At home, Sun-hee did her best to stretch scraps into meals. She boiled weeds, ground tree bark, even added sawdust into flour so Hannah could chew something that looked like bread. But Hannah was thinning, her cheeks had sunk in. Her little body always shivered under blankets. Every night, she still smiled at her father when he returned. But it was the kind of smile that broke his heart. It was too heavy for a child her age. One night, after Hannah fell asleep, Ji-hoon sat beside the fire with Sun-hee. The flames lit her tired face. She looked older, though she was still young. "We cannot live like this," Ji-hoon whispered. Sun-hee turned her head sharply. "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice, though even the walls felt dangerous. "I've heard some people cross the river. To China. There's food there, work, freedom." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "Don't say that word. If anyone hears you, even Hannah, it could kill us." Ji-hoon leaned closer. "I would rather die trying than watch Hannah die slowly here." The silence that followed was heavy. Sunny's hands trembled in her lap. Finally, she whispered, "If you do this, we cannot trust anyone, not even friends." Her warning proved true sooner than he expected. A few days later, at the village well, Ji-hoon met Minho, a neighbor he had known since childhood. Minho's eyes darted left and right before he leaned in. "There's a man," he whispered. "He guides people across." "For a price?" Ji-hoon froze. "What price?" "Jewelry. Anything of value. You have Sun-hee's earrings, don't you?" The mention of the earrings made Ji-hoon's chest tighten. They were the last gifts Sun He had from her mother, a memory of love in a world without mercy. Still, he knew Minho was right. To escape, they would have to give up everything. That night, Minho came quietly to their home. They sat in the dark while Sun He kept watch at the window. His voice was low, urgent. Tomorrow night, near the old bridge by the river, bring nothing but courage and the earrings. The guide will find you. When Minho left, silence filled the house again. Sun He sat motionless for a long time before slowly removing the earrings from her ears. She placed them in Jihoon's hand, her eyes glistening. For Hannah, she said. Jihoon couldn't speak. He only nodded, his throat tight. That night, as Hannah slept, Jihoon lay awake, listening to the wind howl outside. In his mind, he saw the river, dark and wide, with guards patrolling its edge. He saw himself carrying Hannah across icy waters, Sun He holding his hand. He saw soldiers with rifles, their fingers ready on the trigger. Fear twisted inside him. But stronger than fear was the picture of Hannah's weak smile, her whispered question. Appa, will we eat today? Tomorrow, they would try. Tomorrow, they would risk everything. The night air bit at Jihoon's skin as he clutched Hannah against his chest. She was wrapped in a thin blanket, her face buried in his shoulder. Sun He walked beside him, her eyes scanning the shadows. Every sound a barking dog, a snapping twig, even the wind felt like danger waiting to pounce. They reached the old bridge as the moon slipped behind a cloud. The river below was black and restless, its surface broken by chunks of ice. Jihoon's stomach twisted. How could they cross this? But Minho's words echoed in his mind. The guide will find you. Minutes stretched into an hour. The family crouched beneath the bridge, shivering, waiting for the promised guide. Hannah whimpered softly, and Jihoon pressed his hand over her mouth, terrified her cries would carry through the night. Finally, footsteps approached. A man in a thick coat appeared, his face hidden beneath a cap. He didn't smile. He didn't even greet them. His hand extended silently. Jihoon hesitated, then placed the earrings into the man's palm. The metal glinted once in the moonlight before disappearing into his pocket. Follow, the man said. His voice was cold, sharp. They walked in silence, the stranger leading them along the riverbank. Every few steps, Jihoon glanced back, expecting soldiers to emerge from the shadows. His heart pounded louder than their footsteps, but then lights shouts. Stop. A soldier's voice cracked through the darkness. Searchlights swept across the bank, blinding them. The stranger bolted without a word, vanishing into the night. Jihoon froze, clutching Hannah as Sun He gasped. Soldiers poured from the trees, rifles raised. Jihoon's legs refused to move. He thought of running, but Hannah's weight slowed him. A shot cracked the air. A bullet slammed into the ground inches from his foot. Hands grabbed him, yanking Hannah from his arms. Sun He screamed, trying to hold on to their daughter, but a soldier struck her across the face with the butt of his rifle. She crumpled to the ground, blood staining her lip. Jihoon roared, lunging at the nearest guard, but the blow came fast, boots in his stomach, fists against his back. He fell to the dirt, gasping for air. Hannah was crying, her voice piercing through the chaos. The captain of the soldiers stepped forward, his face hard and pitiless. You thought you could escape the great homeland? He spat, his voice dripping with rage. He motioned with his hand. 2 guards pinned Jihoon down while another raised his rifle but high. The crack of bone echoed through the night. Pain exploded in Jihoon's leg. He screamed, his voice carrying across the dark river. Another blow came, crushing the other leg. White-hot agony surged through him, his vision blurring with tears. Sun He tried to crawl to him, but a soldier kicked her back, forcing her face into the dirt. Hannah wailed, her small body trembling in the arms of a guard who held her like a sack of rice. Jihoon's world shrank to pain, to the taste of blood in his mouth, to the burning shame of failure. He couldn't move, couldn't stand, couldn't protect his family. The captain crouched beside him, sneering, "This is what happens to traitors. You will crawl for the rest of your miserable life? You will watch your family starve, knowing it was because of you." The soldiers dragged him upright, his broken legs useless, his body hanging limp between them. They shoved Sun He and Hannah ahead, forcing them back toward the village. As they marched, Jihoon heard Minho's voice in his mind. Trust no one. And suddenly, the truth cut deeper than the pain in his legs. The guide had never been a guide. He had been a trap. Someone had betrayed them, maybe Minho himself. Jihoon lifted his head, struggling to stay conscious. He caught Sun He's eyes. They were filled with terror, but also something else plain. And in that moment, Jihoon knew. Survival in North Korea wasn't just about food or escape, it was about trust. And trust had just killed him. The prison walls smelled of rot and damp earth. Jihoon was dragged through a narrow corridor, his legs hanging uselessly, leaving streaks of blood on the stone floor. His cries had faded into hoarse groans, and now even pain felt like a heavy fog pressing down on him. The guards didn't speak as they hauled him into a cell no larger than a pigsty. They dropped him on the frozen ground like trash. then slammed the iron door shut. The silence after their footsteps faded was deafening. The cell stank of sweat and decay. In the corner, a man's hollow eyes stared back at Jehoon's, skin stretched tight over bone, lips cracked and dry. For a moment, Jehoon thought he was already dead, until the man whispered hoarsely, "New one." Jehoon tried to move, but agony screamed from his shattered legs. The stranger crawled closer, his movements slow and weak. "Don't scream here," he warned. "They like it when you scream. They beat harder if you make noise." Jehoon swallowed his tears, forcing the sound down his throat. He wanted to ask about Sun-hee and Hannah, but fear clamped his voice shut. What if the man was a spy, planted to make him speak? The hours bled together. Guards returned with a metal bowl, sliding it into the cell. Inside was a thin gruel, gray and foul-smelling, with a single grain of rice floating in it. Jehoon's stomach twisted with hunger, but when he tried to lift the bowl, his hands trembled so badly that most of the liquid spilled into the dirt. The stranger licked it from the ground. "Eat fast," he muttered, "or they take it away." Nights were worse. Rats scurried across Jehoon's body, nibbling at his clothes, searching for scraps. Cold gnawed at his bones. And yet it wasn't tea, the cold or hunger that broke him most. It was the sound of screams echoing through the corridors. Men begging, women shrieking, children crying. Every cry carried a story, a punishment, a warning. Days later, though time meant nothing, here Jehoon was dragged from the cell. His legs splinted crudely with wood, screamed with every jolt. Guards shoved him into a courtyard where other prisoners knelt in rows. Sun-hee was among them, her face bruised, her hair tangled, clutching Hannah to her chest. Their eyes met. Jehoon wanted to run to her, but soldiers pushed him to the ground. An officer read from a paper, his voice booming. These traitors attempted to abandon their sacred homeland. Their punishment is labor, starvation, and shame. The crowd of prisoners didn't dare react. Any movement, any whisper, might mean death. Jehoon lowered his head, swallowing rage, swallowing shame. Sun-hee held Hannah tighter, her body trembling. The child's eyes were wide, too young to understand, too young to carry such fear. After the announcement, they were separated again. Jehoon was dragged back into darkness, into the stench of his cell. He pressed his forehead to the cold ground, whispering Sun-hee's name over and over like a prayer. The old prisoner leaned closer. "You still have family," he rasped. "That's dangerous. Guards use family to break men. Remember, love is weakness here." Jehoon closed his eyes, his chest tight with anger. His family wasn't weakness. They were the only reason he was alive. But the man's words haunted him in the silence, wrapping around his heart like chains. Days turned into weeks. Jehoon learned to survive in silence. He learned to chew slowly so the hunger hurt less, to keep his eyes down when guards entered, to mask every thought behind an empty face. But at night, when no one could hear, he wept silently for his wife and child. And in the darkness, he promised himself, broken legs or not, he would find a way back to them. Nights in the prison were a torment worse than the days. The guards locked every cell, doused the lanterns, and left the prisoners in suffocating darkness. The silence was thick until the whispers began. Jehoon lay on the cold ground, staring into nothing. His legs still throbbed from the beating, splinted badly with rotting wood. Every time he moved, pain tore through him, but he forced his breaths to stay slow, steady. In the silence, he heard a faint voice, drifting through the cracks in the stone walls. "Are you alive?" Jehoon froze. The voice was rough, almost broken, but soft enough to avoid the guard's ears. He pressed his lips close to the wall. "Yes," he whispered back, his voice shaking. The voice returned, "Don't speak loud. They'll hear. My name is Min. Cell next to yours." For the first time in weeks, Jehoon felt something stir inside him. Hope. Another human voice, not just screams or orders. Minsu told him he had once been a farmer, caught hoarding corn to feed his children. His family had starved to death while he rotted in prison. His words carried the weight of years of suffering, but also a strange calmness, like he had learned to live with pain. Jehoon shared little. Fear of betrayal gnawed at him. Prisoners often turned on one another for crumbs of food or a promise from the guards. But something in Minsu's voice felt real, steady. Nights passed, and their whispers grew longer. They spoke of stolen memories, Sun-hee's smile, Hannah's laughter, Minsu's youngest boy chasing fireflies in summer. These stolen fragments of life became survival itself. In the day, Jehoon starved and trembled. At night, he clung to whispers like rope in a storm. One evening, Minsu whispered something dangerous. "There's talk of escape?" Jehoon's heart pounded. He pressed his face to the wall. "Escape? How?" "I don't know yet. I only hear rumors," Minsu said. "Some prisoners are planning it. Dangerous men. But maybe you could join them." Hope flared and died quickly in Jehoon's chest. His legs were shattered. How could he run, climb, fight? Yet the thought lingered. escape, freedom, a chance to hold Sun-hee and Hannah again. The next day, Ji-hoon saw it in the courtyard. Two prisoners exchanged glances too quickly, their hands brushing in a coded signal as guards passed. It was true. Something was being planned. That night, Min-soo whispered more. If you survive here, you learn to watch. Listen, even walls have ears. But I think they're serious. They want to move during storm season, when the guards grow lazy. Ji-hoon lay awake long after the whispers ended, staring into the darkness. Could he do it? His body was broken, his soul beaten down, but the thought of Hannah's little hand and his elf Sun-hee's voice calling his name burned brighter than his fear, yet fear was real. If the plan failed, punishment would be beyond imagination. He had already seen men dragged from their cells and never returned. The sound of their screams still haunted the walls. Days blurred together, but every night the whispers returned. They became his lifeline. In silence, he planned, he dreamed, he remembered what it meant to be human. And one night, Min-soo's voice came through the wall again, sharp with urgency. They're moving soon. Ji-hoon's chest tightened. He wasn't ready. He was broken, half-dead, watched by guards who delighted in crushing hope. But maybe this was the only chance he would ever get. The darkness swallowed him, but this time, it felt different. Somewhere in that endless black, a door had cracked open, and for the first time since his capture, Ji-hoon dared to imagine light. The prison woke before the sun. Guards stomped through the corridors, banging metal rods against the doors, their shouts echoing like thunder. Ji-hoon pulled himself up, his splinted legs stiff with pain. The air was heavy with the stench of sweat, mold, and rotting food. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he swallowed it down. Today, something was different. He felt it in the way some prisoners' eyes flickered with a strange light, a quick, nervous fire. Min-soo had whispered it last night. They would move soon. Ji-hoon's heart hadn't stopped pounding since. The day dragged with endless labor. Prisoners hauled stones, shoveled dirt, carried logs until their backs bent and their knees buckled. Ji-hoon struggled with even the smallest tasks, his broken legs making each step an agony. A guard noticed his weakness and slammed a rifle butt into his ribs, sending him crashing to the ground. Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Even rats walk better than you, the guard sneered. Ji-hoon clenched his jaw, biting back a cry. Survival meant silence. But deep inside, his mind was elsewhere, thinking of Min-soo, of whispers in the night, of the chance that tonight could be the night. When darkness finally fell, the prison grew restless. Whispers moved like smoke between cells, barely audible but charged with urgency. Ji-hoon pressed his ear to the wall, waiting. They're ready. Min-soo's voice came, tight and fast. It will happen at dawn. A storm is coming. When guards are distracted, then we run. Ji-hoon's pulse hammered in his temples. Dawn, just hours away. He closed his eyes and tried to see Sun-hee, Hannah, their faces alive in his memory. He needed that fire to keep him breathing. The storm came as promised. Thunder shook the walls, and rain lashed against the prison roofs. At dawn, the guards were sluggish, smoking cigarettes under the eaves to avoid the downpour. The moment seemed perfect. It began with a shout. A prisoner in the yard lunged at a guard, wrestling his rifle away. Another prisoner smashed a rock against the gate's chain. For a heartbeat, chaos, bloom screams, gunshots, rain pounding like drums. Ji-hoon dragged himself from his corner, his heart screaming freedom, freedom. Min-soo appeared, his face pale but determined. Now, move. He hissed through the bars. Ji-hoon tried to run, but his legs betrayed him. Pain exploded with every step. Still, he forced himself forward, clawing the ground, using his arms more than his legs. He could see the gate, half broken, prisoners surging through the storm, and then machine guns. The rattle of bullets tore through the dawn. Prisoners fell in heaps, their bodies splashing into mud. The guard towers blazed with muzzle flashes. Screams filled the yard. Hope crumbled into horror. Min-soo grabbed Ji-hoon's arm, trying to drag him along, but a bullet struck Min-soo's chest. He staggered, blood soaking his shirt. Ji-hoon cried out, but Min-soo shoved him away, gasping, "Keep going," before collapsing into the mud. Ji-hoon's vision blurred with rain and tears. He crawled forward, desperate, but soldiers swarmed the yard, beating down survivors, dragging them back by their hair, kicking and stomping until bones cracked. Hands seized Ji-hoon, yanking him upright. His legs buckled under him, and he screamed in pain. The guard's face was twisted with rage as he slammed Ji-hoon to the ground. "You thought you could run?" the guard roared, stomping on his splinted leg until it snapped again. Ji-hoon's scream tore through the storm, raw and broken. Around him, the escape dissolved into blood and mud. Bodies lay still, rain washing red rivers through the dirt. The dream of freedom had been crushed under boots and bullets. As Ji-hoon was dragged back to his cell, every drop of rain felt like fire against his skin. The dawn had promised escape, but it had delivered only death. And yet, in the hollow wreckage of his soul, one ember still Min-soo's last words echoed inside him, "Keep going." Even as the prison swallowed him back into its darkness, Ji-hoon clung to those words like a lifeline. The yard smelled of iron and wet soil. Rain from the failed escape still clung to the ground, turning the dirt into mud streaked with red. The guards dragged the survivors bloodied, broken, and trembling back to the center. Ji-hoon could barely stand. His legs throbbed like open flames, his ribs bruised, but he was forced upright by the barrel of a rifle pressing against his back. One by one, prisoners were lined up. Soldiers paced in front of them, rifles at the ready, boots splashing through puddles. A commander stepped forward, his uniform spotless, despite the storm. His face was stone, but his voice stripped with cruelty. "You dared to defy the motherland," he barked. "You dared to insult the grace of our leader. There is only one price for betrayal." The prisoners shivered, eyes darting anywhere but forward. Ji-hoon's chest tightened. He knew what was coming. Without warning, the first man in line was dragged out. A soldier raised his rifle, and a single shot cracked through the air. The man's body crumpled, lifeless, into the mud. Gasps echoed, but silence quickly smothered them. One by one, prisoners were executed. Each gunshot echoed through Ji-hoon's skull, each body a reminder that freedom came with death. The soldiers seemed to relish the slaughter, their faces hardened with rage, their boots pressing on the fallen as if they were trash. When the soldier came for Ji-hoon, he froze, his breath caught, his eyes closed. He thought of Sunhee, of Hana, of a life that seemed like a dream now. But the commander raised his hand. "Not this one," he said coldly. "He must live with what he has done. His punishment will be worse than death." The guards sneered, dragging Ji-hoon back. Relief and despair crashed together inside him. He would live but only to suffer. That night, Ji-hoon was forced to kneel in the freezing yard while guards circled him, taunting, striking, and spitting. One guard smashed the butt of his rifle against Ji-hoon's shoulders until he collapsed. Another kicked his stomach until he vomited bile. They laughed as if it were sport. "Run again." One of them jeered, grinding his boot into Ji-hoon's broken leg. "Let's see how far you crawl next time." Ji-hoon bit down on his lip until blood filled his mouth, refusing to scream. Somewhere deep inside he clung to Min-soo's last words, "Keep going." If he screamed, if he begged, he would lose that ember. By dawn his body was a patchwork of bruises and cuts. He could barely lift his head, but in the silence of the prison, something had shifted. The guards wanted him broken, a shell of a man. But the defiance they saw as weakness had carved a new kind of strength inside him. He realized then the true price of defiance. It wasn't only death or pain, it was carrying the weight of hope in a place where hope was poison. It was remembering family when forgetting would make survival easier. It was waking up each day and choosing, somehow, not to die. As Ji-hoon lay in the dirt, the sunrise painted the prison walls a cruel gold. He was still alive, broken but breathing, and that was his quiet act of rebellion. The prison camp in North Korea was surrounded by high fences, rusted watchtowers, and armed guards with cold, lifeless eyes. Inside, hundreds of men moved like ghosts in bodies, bent under endless labor, faces hollow from hunger, eyes too tired to dream. The ground was frozen mud, the air sharp with winter wind, and the smell of smoke and rotting food clung to everything. It was not a place for living, only for dying slowly. Ji-hoon dragged his injured legs through the snow, carrying heavy stones from one side of the yard to the other. The guards never cared about the purpose of the work. It was punishment, not labor. His legs, once broken by soldiers at the border, never healed properly. Each step felt like fire in his bones, but he refused to fall. In this camp, falling meant being beaten, sometimes beaten to death. That night, after a day of endless work, Ji-hoon sat in the corner of a wooden barrack, shivering in the dark. The other prisoners were silent, afraid even to whisper. But in the corner, he noticed a boy barely 16, his uniform hanging loose over his starved body. The boy tried to chew on a piece of frozen cornbread, too hard and dry to swallow. His hands trembled, his lips cracked and bleeding. For a moment, Ji-hoon hesitated. He was starving too. His own ration was barely enough to keep him alive. But something inside him, something that reminded him of his daughter, Hannah, moved his hand. He broke off a small piece of his bread and slid it across the floor to the boy. The boy stared at him with wide, desperate eyes. Sharing food in a North Korean prison camp was unthinkable. Food was survival. But Ji-hoon only whispered, his voice barely louder than the wind outside. "Eat. Stay alive." From that night on, Ji-hoon became more than a prisoner. In secret, when the guards were gone, he whispered stories to those around him. He told them about Hannah, his little girl with bright eyes who used to chase fireflies in their village near the Yalu River. He told them about his wife, Sunhee, who sang lullabies when the electricity went out and the night was darker than black. He spoke softly, carefully, but his words were fire in the cold. The men around him began to change. The boy he helped stopped looking like a corpse and started whispering back. He told Ji-hoon about his mother who once worked in the rice fields, about dreams of planting seeds in free soil someday. Other prisoners joined in. In the silence of the barracks, hope passed from one mouth to another like forbidden treasure. It was dangerous. Guards punished even the smallest act of kindness. They wanted the prisoners broken, obedient, without spirit. But Ji-hoon no longer feared them. His body was already destroyed, but his spirit, his memories, his voice still belonged to him. That was his rebellion. Soon, whispers became a quiet resistance. Men stood a little straighter. They endured the beatings with clenched jaws instead of tears. The guards noticed. They knew someone was keeping the fire alive. Ji-hoon suspected his name was already in their ears. But when he looked around at the faces of men who once shuffled like the dead, he felt no regret. One freezing night, as snowflakes drifted into the cracks of the barrack, Ji-hoon lay awake. He thought of Hannah. He pictured her standing in their village, reaching her small hands to catch the falling snow. Was she still alive? Did she think of him? His chest ached with longing, but he clung to the image like prayer. The boy's voice broke the silence. Ajushi, why do you help us? You suffer too. Ji-hoon turned his head, a faint smile touching his cracked lips. Because if we lose hope, then we are already dead. And in that moment, Ji-hoon understood. The regime could starve him, chain him, break his body again and again, but they could never take what lived inside. His whispers were stronger than their walls. As long as he breathed, he would keep the fire alive. The winter inside the camp grew harsher. The wind that howled through the wooden barracks felt like knives against bare skin. Prisoners huddled together like animals, thin bodies pressed close for warmth. Ji-hoon sat against the wall, his broken legs stretched stiffly before him. Each breath left a white cloud in the dark. Each heartbeat felt slower than the last. The guards grew crueler with the cold. Food rations shrank from a handful of cornmeal to a few hard kernels tossed into filthy bowls. Men fought each other for scraps, desperate for one more day of survival. Those who collapsed in the fields were not carried back. They were left in the snow, their bodies stiff before nightfall. Ji-hoon worked silently, carrying rocks, chopping wood, dragging heavy carts. His legs throbbed constantly, but his eyes held something different, something the guards noticed and hated. It wasn't defiance in words, it was defiance in spirit. He still lived, he still endured. One evening, as the prisoners returned from work, Ji-hoon stumbled and fell into the snow. His body refused to rise. A guard kicked him hard in the ribs, shouting insults. Blood filled his mouth, hot and metallic, but Ji-hoon only clenched his fists in the snow. When night came, he lay awake in the barrack. Around him men groaned in pain, whispered prayers, or sank into restless sleep. But Ji-hoon's mind drifted far beyond the fences. He saw Hannah. In his memory, she was no longer a starving child. She was standing on the banks of the river, her small hands outstretched toward the sky. Her eyes shone with hope. She called to him, her voice soft, like the songs her mother once sang. Appa, don't give up. His chest tightened. He knew it was only a dream, a fragile picture painted by his exhausted mind. But in that moment, it felt real. His daughter was waiting not here, not in this frozen hell, but in the promise of freedom beyond the fences. Ji-hoon pressed his hand to his chest. His fingers felt the thin ribs, the bones too sharp beneath the skin. He whispered to himself, so quietly no one else could hear. I will not die here. Hannah, I will not let your memory be buried in this snow. It was an oath, not a promise of survival. He knew death was always near, but it was a vow to resist, until his final breath. If his body broke, his voice would not. If his life ended, his story would live through the whispers he had planted among the prisoners. The young boy he had once fed with a piece of bread crawled closer in the dark. His face was pale, his lips cracked, but his eyes carried a spark. Ajushi, the boy whispered, why do you still fight? Ji-hoon looked at him, then at the others lying in silence. He spoke slowly, his voice hoarse but steady. Because my daughter is waiting for me, because your mother is waiting for you. Because the world outside this fence is bigger than their guns. One day, someone will live free and we must believe it can be us. The boy's eyes glistened. He nodded, clutching Ji-hoon's words as if they were food. And in that exchange, Ji-hoon felt his oath grow stronger. The next day, Ji-hoon limped into the yard, carrying stones with his broken legs dragging behind him. The guards mocked him, laughing at his stubbornness. But Ji-hoon did not bow his head. Every step, every gasp of breath, was his rebellion. He was no longer just surviving, he was fighting, silently, with every ounce of will left in him. That night, as snow fell gently outside the barracks, Ji-hoon whispered once more to the darkness. Hana, Sunhee, I will keep walking, even if I crawl. I will carry you with me until my last breath. And in the frozen silence of the camp, his vow was sealed. The camp was quiet that morning, too quiet. Snow had fallen heavily overnight, covering the fences and watchtowers in a soft white blanket. But inside the walls, misery never changed. Prisoners lined up in the yard, shivering, their faces pale from hunger. Ji-hoon stood among them, though his legs trembled so violently that each breath felt like it would topple him. His body had been pushed beyond its limits, broken bones, bruised ribs, hollow eyes. Yet something inside him still burned. It was faint, like the last ember of a dying fire, but it refused to go out. The guards barked orders, forcing men to drag logs and shovel snow. Ji-hoon bent down to lift a log, his arms shaking, his vision blurred, but he held on. He thought of Hana, her laughter echoing in his mind, the warmth of her small hands. He thought of Sunhee, her voice singing softly in the dark. Their memories became his strength. As the day wore on, Ji-hoon collapsed in the snow. A guard shouted at him, kicking his side, but Ji-hoon didn't move. The pain was distant now, almost gentle, like the tide pulling him away. The boy he had spoken to the night before rushed forward. "Ajushi," he cried, kneeling beside him. His voice shook, but Ji-hoon managed a faint smile. He lifted a trembling hand and touched the boy's arm. "Listen," Ji-hoon whispered, his voice thin but steady. "Don't forget what I told you. There is life beyond this fence. Promise me, you will try." The boy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I promise." Ji-hoon closed his eyes. The cold no longer felt sharp. Instead, he saw warmth, the river in spring, the laughter of Hana chasing dragonflies, Sunhee hanging laundry under the sun. He saw freedom, not for himself, but for those who might live after him. The guard shouted again, but Ji-hoon no longer heard. His chest rose once, then fell. The breath left his body quietly, like a candle flickering out. For a moment, the yard was still. Snow continued to fall, soft and endless, covering Ji-hoon's body in white. To the guards, he was just another prisoner gone, another number erased. But to the boy, and to the men who had heard his whispered oath, Ji-hoon was something more. He was proof that even in the darkest corners of North Korea, the human spirit could not be crushed completely. That night, the boy repeated Ji-hoon's words to the others. Beyond the fence, there is life. One day, someone will live free. And though Ji-hoon's body remained in the frozen camp, his story traveled quietly through whispers, carried by those who survived. His last breath became a seed of hope. The ember he left behind would not die.